Hello, this is Chris McGrath, TDN. Welcome to the latest in our Life's Work series in association with Keeneland and the Nunn Centre for Oral History at the University of Kentucky. And today we're delighted to have been invited to Shadwell to meet with Mr. Rick Nichols. Rick has managed the Kentucky wing of Sheikh Hamdan's breeding empire since he first grazed mares here 35 years ago. Yeah, Rick's own origins gave no hint to his ultimate vocation. His father was a construction manager in Texas, an engineer and an architect, though the fact that he was self-taught perhaps gives some clue to the kind of resources that were inherited by his son, resources of character that underpin the flair Rick discovered for horses in himself.
I felt sort of obligated to follow in my father's footsteps, although he never pushed me to do so. But unfortunately, he passed away right before I graduated high school. And I'd already been accepted in the University of Texas, but my mother wanted to go back to Kansas to her folks. It gave me a chance to rethink things. I was able to go to a junior college close by for a couple of years and established residency, and went on to Kansas State. And I wanted to go to vet school, but that was during the Vietnam draft, and I had a deferment, and that would only protect you your undergraduate. And vet school, they wouldn't even talk to me. I did start working on a master's degree with a gentleman from Colorado State, Dr. Bill Pickett, who was a leading authority on equine reproduction at the time and knew more about stallions than anybody. And I wanted to do my master's on artificial insemination. I was trying to break into the horse business, but I was doing construction. There was a veterinarian there, his name was Dr. Allison, and he had a hog farm. And he had dreams of building a big hog production unit. So he kind of talked me into doing that, and I was working on the hog farm, and the old guy that was running for him realized that if that ever did come to happen, he'd be out of a job. So he fired me. So I had to settle for the horse business. I got fired off a hog farm.
The hog farm's loss would become the horse business's gain.
But as luck would have it, the Arabian Registry started investigating the possibility of using artificial insemination as a management tool. And they selected 5 farms in the United States to set up a program, see if it'd work. Bentwood Farm in Waco, Texas was one of those farms. So I went there to set up their program. We had like an 86% conception rate. But the Arab horses and the show horses was not what I was interested in. I wanted to really get into racing. To me, show horses are great. I don't have anything, but somebody's determining the winner. A human being is determining the winner. Where in racing, the horse determines the winner. And that's the ultimate goal. And so I had a chance. There was a guy named John D. Marsh in Virginia. He asked me to come and work for him. His manager / farm trainer was retiring in about a year, and he wanted me to come work for a year. And it gave me an opportunity to spend some time on the racetracks. But I'd been talking to a man named Dr. Robert Leonard, who had Glade Valley Farm. And this is one of the first home runs I hit in my career, going to work for him. He was by far the best horseman that I'd had contact with. And right now I'd put him number 2 behind Sheikh Hamdan as far as the greatest horseman I've been associated with. Because he was a veterinarian, he was a very good reproductive veterinarian, but he was a horseman first. And he raced very good racehorses off of very mediocre bloodlines. I thought I knew something about reproduction in horses when I went to work for him, but he taught me so much. Little things you can do. And it was funny, is because of him, I finally made it to Kentucky. I'd always wanted to come to Kentucky ever since I was young. And it was right after Christmas time. We was gonna drive back to Texas and see the family. So I thought, well, I'll just stop by Kentucky. I'd like to see Exclusively Native. So I'll go in Spendthrift. And John Williams comes up there. And we get to talking. And of course, he was from Maryland. And the Combs has brought a lot of people from Maryland and Virginia to rejuvenate Spendthrift. He said, well, I just had a broodmare manager resign. Would you be interested? Well, of course. So we talked and worked it out, and that's when I came to Spendthrift. You know, another gentleman that had a very positive impact on me at Spendthrift was Mr. Leslie Combs. He taught me a lot. There's certain people in our business, like you have clients, they're not horsemen. They don't understand. They don't know that mares abort, that mares rupture an artery and die, and horses break legs, but he was. He was a true horseman. He had a great sense of humor. He was a great businessman. He always treated me very well. And I always had such great respect for him. I remember the day I had to go in and tell him that Gold Digger had slipped. Gold Digger was the mother of Mr. Prospector, and she was carrying a full sibling to Mr. Prospector. And that was just as Mr. Prospector was really getting on. He just looked at me and said, well, you'll get her in full for me again, won't you, boy? Well, sure try. Very few people can take news like that.
If Rick's boss at Spendthrift was extraordinary, then so too was the work he was doing.
In the last few years I was at Spendthrift, I was not only broodmare manager, but assistant manager. So, but yeah, we worked with the stallions a lot, actually. You know, back then, stallions didn't breed near as many mares as they do today. And certain stallions, if they don't breed a lot, they have issues with semen storage and so forth. So I convinced John and Mr. Combs to bring in Dr. Pickett and Dr. Jim Voss from Colorado State to evaluate the stallions so we could see if a horse, if he doesn't have a mare today, for him to be productive tomorrow, he's got to be bred today. Or he's breeding too much, we need to give him a day off every so often. And by bringing them in, we dramatically increased our conception rate the following year, just by proper management. And so yeah, I had a lot of favorite stallions, Nashua being probably the top, but Raise a Native. Seattle Slew, he was hard to have a favorite because he was such a slow breeder. I mean, Raise a Native, he'd breed anything. It didn't matter where they was. He actually bred a mare laying on the ground one night. He came in, he jumped, but he hit her low and knocked her down. But Slew, he would drive you nuts because he come in, he'd look at the birds in the breeding shed, and I took one mare up there one morning. We was there from 7 till about 11. We took a break. Come back after lunch. We was there till 4. Took a break. Come back at 7 that night. Stayed around to about 10. The next morning I checked her, and luckily enough she hadn't ovulated. Brought her in there, and he bred her like Raise a Native that morning. And you just wanted to shoot him. It's like, why didn't you do that yesterday? But we had a lot of great stallions. It was, you know, back in those days, like Spendthrift and Claiborne and Calumet and Gainesway, it's kind of like your hometown high school football teams, and they competing on the track, competing into sales. It was a little different than it is now. But then one day I got a call and was asked if I would be interested in managing a farm for Sheikh Hamdan Al Maktoum. Well, Sheikh Hamdan had already bought a farm. It was the old Mill Ridge 2 farm out off Harrodsburg Road. It was about 350 acres. And he had left or leased it back to them for a year until he could get a manager and things set up. And he had about, I think he had 18 mares. And so originally it was just, the idea was just going to be a small farm with a few mares in central Kentucky. But it became apparent very quickly that wasn't going to last too long. I met him at Royal Ascot. I started on June 1st, and Royal Ascot was about the middle of the month. So I go over there and get all dressed up. And back then, they had a little house by the walking range. I go in, sit down, talk to him for a while, and a little while later, Sheikh Maktoum comes in, sits down, we talk for a little bit. And I didn't know it at the time, but at the end of the day, you English, you have what you call chatting you up. And Sheikh Hamdan didn't particularly like that too much, I don't think. But at the end of the day, Sheikh Maktoum told Sheikh Hamdan in Arabic, I didn't know it, "Your American is very quiet. That'd be a good name for a horse." He calls Michael goodbye. He said, "Pick out my best weanling and name it Quiet American." And I didn't know all this. And a couple of years later, we was at Newmarket, and a chestnut colt goes up the track wearing Sheikh Maktoum's colors, and the boss is looking at him through his binoculars. He said, "You know what that horse's name is?" I said, "No." He says, "Quiet American. He's named after you." And he told me that story. So that's my only claim to fame.
No, Rick. As everyone in this business knows, that is not your only claim to fame. But the roots of Shadwell's Kentucky empire had to be laid down patiently. Quietly, you might say.
That's an interesting story, how we came up with it. This was owned by Nelson Bunker Hunt, part of his holdings. When Sheikh Hamdan come for a visit, I explained to him, I said, this farm, it's not really what you need or what you're going to need. The land is okay, but not the best in Kentucky. The buildings are mediocre, and there's no room to expand. The land around it is not good at all. I said, "Could we look for something else?" And he said, "Well, sure." And this was when Mr. Hunt was in trouble. Buddy Edwards did all his real estate work. And I knew this farm. I knew this is the one we wanted. Because this area right in here is the absolute best land in central Kentucky. Can't get any better. So I called Buddy just casually, saying, we might be looking for some 700-800 acres, close to town, don't really care what's on it. If you happen to come across something like that, you let me know. 3 days later, he calls me up. "I got something I need to show you." Okay. He brings me right here. They were wanting a lot of money for it, rightfully so. So I called the boss. It took me 4 minutes on the phone to convince him to buy it. But right before I hang up, he said, "But Rick, you've got to sell my farm for what I paid for it." Oh, man. Because, rich Arab comes to town. They stuck it to him. He probably paid $1 million more than that farm was worth. So how am I going to sell it? I thought about it for 2 or 3 days. And I woke up one morning about 4 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Hunt might need a tax break with the situation he's in. Wonder if they would let us trade our farm in for their farm. And they turn around and sell it, they're going to lose $1 million. So I called Buddy up. Called me back 2 days later, said, "Yeah, we'll do it." So we got to 720 acres here. There was a a long 32 stall block barn up back over here. They had 3 barns that was good enough to use. The rest of them were just old converted tobacco barns that we started tearing down. And we was able to buy the Burrier farm next over, and then a couple of other pieces back in there. And we got up to about 1,450 acres. In 1993, Sheikh Hamdan says, we designed it to have 60 mares and their offspring through the yearling year. And he said, my best horses come from Kentucky, and 60's not enough. Can you go up to 100? So we bought a little more land here, and then we bought Shadwell stud, which was 825 acres down by Midway. Then the following year we bought Arab stud, which was another 500 acres. But interestingly, when I was telling the boss about this piece of property, he said, who owns it? And I said, Nelson Bunker Hunt. He said, oh, he won't sell it to me. I said, why not? And he said, I'll tell you sometime. But what that goes back to when Mr. Hunt was trying to corner the silver market. They didn't realize how much silver there is in India. He just about had the market cornered when a 747 took off from India and landed in Dubai, full of silver. He bought it. Next one, next day, next day, next day. They went on for about 2 weeks, and at one point he got, can't buy it no more. So Sheikh Hamdan thought Mr. Hunt would blame Dubai for his downfall in the silver market. But when the boss came and looked at this property for the first time, with these rolling hills, he questioned me. He said, Rick, I'm not sure about these hills, because his farm in England's flat. Dubai's flat. I said, well, when you run a horse at Epsom, does he run flat or up and down hills? And he just kind of nodded. He thought that was a good idea. So luckily, a couple of years later, it worked. Nashwan, his mama was something very special. That's a picture of her up there. Big, long, leggy. And the boss sent several trainers to see Nashwan as a baby, as a yearling. And all of them said he was leggy. And the boss hadn't seen him yet. He landed and he said, tell me about this blushing groom colt. Everybody says he's leggy. I said, he's not leggy. I said, he's high off the ground, but his forearms are this long. His cannon bones are this long. I said, he's not leggy. You know, a leggy horse got long cannon bones. And, yes, I saw him win the Guineas, and I saw him win the Derby. When he won the Guineas, the boss couldn't get to him because of the crowd. And I still swear to this day, he didn't actually see him cross the finish line, because I was standing right beside him. And as soon as Nashwan crossed the finish line, I turned and he was gone. He was heading to that horse. He looked like a Packer linebacker going through the crowd. I mean, knocking people out of the way.
Though his personal profile has always remained understated, everyone in this industry knows Sheikh Hamdan's passion for pedigrees.
Yeah, in early years, we was solely focused on producing horses for England or Europe, because we had the stallions back then to do it. Blushing Groom, Riverman, Nureyev, all those great turf sires. But they're not here anymore. And we've got very few horses that are proven to work in Europe. So it's becoming more and more difficult. We, probably about 10 years ago, the boss really started focusing on trying to win the Kentucky Derby and building our stable here, knowing that, you know, we tried to bring some good stallions over from England to stand, but people wouldn't use them because they didn't understand the turf. And back then, we had very little turf racing in America. It was dirt. And we're getting more and more turf racing, and there's more and more sires starting to come to the light as being successful. But just because they're good on American turf, it's different than English turf. The one good thing about our operation is Dubai. Because, okay, maybe we'll send a horse to England that is half dirt pedigree, half turf, or all dirt, just to try him. If they don't work, he can take them on to Dubai or send them back here, which we do that a lot. Well, when it comes to culling offspring of height of fashion, we cut them a lot of slack, because her daughters, her granddaughters, even her great-granddaughters now are producing. So you never know when it's going to come back. You might have a granddaughter that hadn't produced anything, but maybe she had a daughter and she's already produced a stakes winner. So our culling process with height of fashion blood is not as strict as it is with other bloodlines that we have. But yes, we give a mare every chance. And a lot of times you look back on her record, you say, okay, this mare's had 5 foals and she hadn't had anything. But we bred her to stallions that haven't produced anything. So it's not necessarily her fault. So you give her another chance. Sheikh Hamdan is very good in pedigrees and very good knowing how he wants to mate mares. And it's something he studies and he enjoys it. A funny story is we had a filly called Tarib. And on the Guineas Day, she won the Pretty Polly. And the boss goes down to get his trophy, and Angus Gold was standing there, and the boss said, Angus, is this filly nominated for the French Derby, or the French Guineas? Oh, she is, but it's only a week away, and blah, blah, blah. And the boss just nodded, goes up and gets his trophy, comes back, and at the time, young Ed Dunlop was standing there, the trainer. Said, Ed, are you sure you nominated for the Guineas? Yes, sir, but it's only a week away, and mama. The boss looks at him. He said, gentlemen, next week I'm going to be in Chantilly, and so is this filly. Would you like to join us? And he turns around and walks off. And they take her, and she wins the French Guineas. Another good story about how good a horseman he is was with Barry. Barry was running at Ascot in, was it Queen Elizabeth, which was going to determine who was champion miler. But Barry liked it liked it firm, and it rained the night before. Sheikh Hamdan goes out that morning and walks the course. Doesn't say anything to anybody. We're in the saddling enclosure, or the walking ring, and Willie Carson, our jockey, comes up. And the boss loves giving instructions to his jockeys. He looked at Willie, it's dead serious. He said, I don't know how you're going to do what I want you to do. You're either going to have to gun him or take him back. But as soon as you can, you go to the outside rail. And the trainer and Angus, their jaws dropped, like, what are you talking about? Well, Willie did it. He got him to the outside rail. Well, the boss said, you take him to the outside rail, you stay there all the way around. When you get to the top of the stretch, cut, make your angle across, and come on home. Which he did. Because the boss realized that the limbs hanging over the outside rail kept the rein from getting there, and it was firm. And I still remember the announcer, what the heck's Willie doing? And they refer to it as a Willie Carson route now, but it's the Sheikh Hamdan route.
Of course, this business being what it is, things don't always work out quite so well. But then it's the bad times that are the true measure of a good boss.
You're asking how the boss takes things like that? He's so good. It's such a pleasure because everybody on this farm works very hard to do the best we can. The same as we did at Spendthrift, but when I was at Spendthrift, I had like 80 clients. And this was back the days before cell phones. So I'd get home at night, my phone would ring till midnight. And these people, they weren't horse people. They didn't know. I had one lady call me up, and for 10 minutes she ranted and raving about the fact I hadn't bred her mare yet. It was the middle of April. I said, ma'am, I always thought it'd be a good idea to let her foal before we bred her. But leaving those 80 clients behind was such a pleasure when you're dealing with the boss. And anytime I call the boss, tell me we lost something, no, he always says, inshallah, God's will. So he takes it very good. Because he's a horseman. He knows things happen.
Things don't just happen to horses, of course. And there's one member of the Shadwell team whose stoicism in the face of human adversity moves Rick greatly. Kiaran McLaughlin.
Kiaran is phenomenal for what hand he's been dealt in life and how he gets through it, how it doesn't weight him down. I can't say enough about him and how much respect I have for him. It really came to light a couple of years ago. I had a bad accident, shattered both ankles and broke both legs. And I was in a wheelchair for 8-9 months. And I would think about Kiaran. Of course, Kiaran's not in a wheelchair, but he struggles. And I kept thinking, someday I'll be okay. But Kiaran he doesn't have that hope. You know, he's not going to be okay. But his attitude, his mindset on how he deals with it is something you just got to admire and respect. Well, of course, we all knew Kiaran before he developed his problem. But yes, we would hire him today because he is such a good trainer, good horseman. And, you know, his passion for it is like the rest of ours, that we're all equal in how we want Sheikh Hamdan to do well and what we're willing to do to help him get there.
Their boss, after all, has always shown an unfailing loyalty of his own. One of his trainers in Britain, the late Dick Hearn, enjoyed an Indian summer in his career because Sheikh Hamdan, unlike other patrons, kept the faith after he was confined to a wheelchair by a hunting accident.
You hire people for their ability. It's like when Sheikh Hamdan bought the yard for Dick Hearn to train out of after the Queen. One day we was at Newmarket and this young reporter came and stuck a microphone in the boss's face and said, how come you hired Dick Hearn after the Queen? And or why did you do it? He said, the boss gave the best one-line comment. He said, his body is broken, but not his mind. And that little reporter didn't have a clue what to say after that. But that was a great response. And you can't find anybody that does more for his employees than he does. Health insurance, retirement, everything. Because you can't raise good horses without good people. And you need people that'll stay with you. And all of our people have been here a long time. Like Stephanie's been here 27 years. Greg's been here forever. I know. Scott, our maintenance manager, is 33 years now. Shonda, our accountant's been here since day one. Somebody said here a while back, if you work at Shadwell and been there 10 years, you're still the new kid, which it's a great thing. We have very little turnover. And it's all because of Sheikh Hamdan and his caring for his employees and for his horses.
True, it's a two-way street. People go to great lengths for a boss like this, as was comically apparent the day Kiaran McLaughlin saddled Invasor to win the World Cup in his employer's homeland.
We were there, and of course Kiaran, he trained in Dubai, but he had forgotten, in America, they get your silks ready for you. We didn't have any silks. We was about ready to win the World Cup, and we didn't have a set of silks. And there's a gentleman called Humaid Obaid, who's very close to the boss, kind of leads his security. And I called Humaid. I said, I forget whose stable was the closest. I said, how can we get there and get a set of silks and get them back here in 10 minutes with all this traffic? He said, leave it to me. He sends an ambulance, lights flashing, to this yard, gets a set of silks and got them back here just in the nick of time.
And make no mistake, his team's devotion to Sheikh Hamdan reflects a deeper generosity than might be found in the terms of their contracts.
He's an incredible man. He's done so much for me and people of Shadwell, but personally, on a personal basis, I lost my father when I was 18, and he was my best friend. And when I turned 35 and started working for Sheikh Hamdan, I wish people could get to know him the way I know him. Because to me, he's always been sometimes a father figure, sometimes like a big brother, sometimes like a friend. He's always the boss. But he'll sit around here and we'll talk just like you and I are talking. In a lot of ways, he's like my father. I think outside of my father, he's the best friend I've ever had. My father used to take me hunting. Sheikh Hamdan takes me hunting. I've been afforded to do things that kings and queens can't do. He cares about his people, he cares about his horses. He's very relaxed. It's not ever any pressure. And he knows that as long as he takes care of his people will take care of his horses. And he does a good job of that. It's been a great career. If I can last another 10 and a half months, I will be 70 years old, and I've worked for the boss 35 years. So I've worked for him half my life. I didn't think anybody ever employed me that long. After getting fired from the hog farm,